I'm one of the greats of our time, Mike Leigh, the director of Naked, Happy Go Lucky, Secrets and Lies, Vera Drake, and of course Peter Lou. Peter Lou. One more round of applause. So that's the way we're going to do it now. I'm going to ask a few questions, and then we're going to pass the mic to the audience, and they'll have their very wise and thoughtful questions. So if you don't mind, I'm going to ask the first one. I just watched your 1997 interview. It was after you released Career Girls, and you said that one of the things, or the main things that interested you at that time, making films, was seeing how life changes people, how people, the way people change and stay the same. Has anything changed since 1997?
Yeah, I mean, that particular quote was in relation to that particular film.
Okay.
Because if anyone has seen that film, it's about these two women when they're 30, and it keeps flashing back to when they were 20 and they were students. And so that's what that film was about. So that quote really, the way that we change and we don't change, and you meet somebody years later and you think, God, they've changed, and then you think, no, actually still the same person, and all that stuff. That's what that particular quotation and that particular issue was about.
Okay, so it doesn't translate to all the work that you did.
I don't really know the answer to the question you're asking. I apologise. I haven't had time to turn off my phone.
Oh, sorry.
For me, I have ongoing preoccupations with life, with people, with the way we live, and all of those are in my films in different ways, and each film deals with a different issue or different issues, but they're all ongoing, so I don't really have a particular answer to your question.
Okay, and another thing, that all the films that you made were written by you, and I think this is like the purest control that you can get, that you have the screenplay, screenwriting, and directed. So how much of a control freak are you?
I don't think you can be a film director without being a control freak.
Okay.
I mean, put it another way, any film director that says I'm not a control freak is bullshitting.
Okay.
But on the other hand, I think it's important to say that two things. One, we film directors don't make films by ourselves. Painters, poets, novelists, potters, sculptors, composers, everybody. These guys work by themselves, they work in a complete isolation. You don't make films by yourself. It's a collaborative process. And the more really collaborative you are, the better the results. So that's the first thing. The second thing is, as everybody knows, I don't sit in a room writing screenplays. I arrive at the screenplay, if you want to call it that. I arrive at the film, which includes that which you would call the screenplay, by a process of research and development and gathering people together and working for a long period with actors before we shoot and building scenes in the location through improvisation and rehearsal and so on and so forth. So it's very collaborative. So yes, you have to be in control, but you have to give and take. And so it's not black and white.
Well, you're very famous for, rehearsing a lot, improvising, talking to the actors, and I also thought that this is some kind of a control issue too, because you want to be sure that they get exactly what you want, what you see in this story. So is it the part of control or not?
Well, it is, but I don't start with a fixed idea of exactly what it's going to be. I discover that through what we do, through what they do. It's a journey of discovery. So, I mean, sure. The important thing is that You know, there aren't committees of people, producers and backers and, you know, television executives or whoever it is, or censors even, interfering with what I do or how I do it, including my latest film, Peterloo, which was screened here yesterday, which was backed by Amazon Studios, and Amazon Studios were fantastic. They never interfered at all. They never interfered at all with the film. They just were completely supportive and let me do what I like. But you're talking about the actual work, the creative process. You know, it's about in a disciplined way, setting up things and then exploring what happens and taking from it, which is how art works. All artists, in whatever medium, all creative processes, all art involves a synthesis of improvisation and order. You know, you start with a mark on the canvas and then you react to it and you change it and you take from it and give to it, and that's how it works. Now, whether you want to talk about that, as you apparently do, in terms of control and things, of course, it's about that, but it's not just about a rigid thing called control, because if it were, it would be dead.
How long does the process take? I mean, when do you know then it's over, you did all the rehearsing you wanted, and then you can start shooting?
No, that's romantic.
Okay.
Because if you follow that to its logical conclusion, we would say, well, we'll start to develop it, and maybe in maybe 6 months or a year or 5 or 10 years, when we feel we're ready, we'll just suddenly say, on Monday we'll start shooting a film. Well, that's ridiculous. You know, it's job. It's a discipline, it's a movie, it's got a budget, it's got to be delivered by a certain time. And so therefore, you know, we say, okay, rehearsal for the film, after lots of preparation, will begin on April the 1st, and the shoot will begin on September the 1st. Now, apart from anything else, but during that time, apart from the work that I will be doing with the actors, you know, production design have to plan, cinematography have to plan, people have to organise things. So you have a date. Now, as far as I'm concerned, the deadline, and everybody, I'm sure lots of people here will resonate with this and understand it, that deadlines are good.
Okay.
If you've got a deadline, makes you deliver on time.
So you're good under pressure.
Yeah, but it's an ordinary part of the creative process. Yeah, definitely. If I had an endless amount of time, I think it would get lost in something.
What do you look for in actors when you cast them? You tend to work with the same troupe, yeah? But,
yeah.
Okay, what do you look for?
Well, there are two separate things. Let's just deal with the troupe. It's not,
Okay.
It's sort of a bit true, but not really true. I mean,
Leslie Manville,
there's quite
Timothy
a lot of
Spall,
actors who
right.
come and go back and do it again. But every time you see a film of mine, there are new actors, be they younger or older actors. It's but what I look for is very specific. I work only with, first of all, character actors, which is to say, people who don't play themselves, people who are not motivated to be actors by narcissism or their ego, people who really are committed to and good at playing real people out there in the street, and are passionate about that and are able to do it and want to show society. So that's important. Actors they've got to be intelligent, and not all actors are intelligent.
Yeah, that's true.
In fact, a lot of actors are as thick as pig shit, and I don't work with them. You know, I only work with the intelligent.
How do you test them?
I talk them. I put them in a pigsty. We have auditions. People come, if I meet an actor for the first time, apart from seeing people working, I will first of all have the actor just come in and just chat for half an hour. Nobody else in the room, just us. Just talk and tune the fire. Then, if I want to pursue it, they come back for an hour or so, and I get them to do some work. That's it. I was going to say something else.
Yeah, and getting back to the troupe and the way what you look in.
Yeah, I
in
mean, that's the thing. It's actors who are, and also actors, as you imply, that who are good at working with each other, you know, and are not going to be selfish and so good. And you know, the kind of actors I work with, generally speaking, are people, which is the case with most actors in the UK, certainly, who are film actors and theatre actors and television actors and indeed radio actors as well.
My next question was, what's special about British actors? I mean, when we see the British film, the film from the UK, most of the time we can sense that. I mean, and of course, when we watch your films, we know that all of these guys are British actors, and there is something special about that.
Yes, there is. I mean, we have obviously the tradition of acting in the UK and England goes back a very long way, long before Shakespeare. You know, Shakespeare's theatre. So there is a very deep tradition of acting, and there is a very strong resource of modern actors who are. I think one of the strengths is that actors do have theatre experience, and I think that's important actually in terms of the disciplines of acting. But you know, for whatever reason, yeah, we are blessed with terrific actors.
I have a celebrity question.
Oh.
I'm sorry.
I don't know any celebrities.
No. You know them. Actually, you were the one who discovered Gary Oldman and Tim Roth in your TV film Meantime. And
can I just say that as we're talking about Meantime, my partner Marianne Bailey, who's here, it plays the auntie in Meantime.
Oh,
And,
okay, we should applaud to that. Thank you.
So it's important. If you're going to mention Meantime, you have to mention Marion.
Okay, Marion, Mike. How did you find them? What was special about them?
First of all, at that time they weren't stars. They were actors nobody had ever heard of.
Right.
I found them the same way as you find actors, through the usual procedure. They were young and they were talented and they were good. They were special, as all the actors in the film were, and the fact that they've gone on to be Hollywood movie stars isn't my fault, and that's their problem.
How did you feel when most of the actors you work with turned out to be in Harry Potter movies?
Fine. These guys have to make a living, and they get very good money for it.
And how come you never made a Hollywood movie? I'm sure they approached you.
To be
See?
that's a punishment for
Yeah. Don't go there.
I'm sorry. This is the God's work. God's work. The devil's. I don't know.
And that was my answer to
Yeah, this is the answer. Okay. Moving to the next one. Moving to the next one. Okay.
Look, there are two serious answers to this question. First of all, we're here in Odessa. Seriously, there are two cinemas. There is Hollywood and there is world cinema. World cinema is important. At any given moment in the world, people are making all kinds of pure cinema. Films about life, films about reality, films that reflect the world they come from. Then there is Hollywood. Hollywood is an industry which dominates the world through a whole variety of historical and commercial reasons. And we must not make the mistake of thinking about Hollywood as being what defines cinema, because it isn't. Great things that come out of Hollywood, etc., but it is not not the definition of cinema. So you asked me the question, why don't I make?
Well, you never made
Well,
it.
that's the other question you asked me. I'll deal with that one in a minute.
Okay.
But the question is why I've never made a film in Hollywood, and the fact is, the question is, put it very plainly, is why the fuck should I?
Well, resources, I don't know, maybe a bigger scale if you want that. If you want to direct a Batman film,
But that's,
it was your dream.
Those criteria may influence other people's decisions about what they want to make, but that's not what it's about for me. For me, it's about making films which that reflect the world that I want to depict, and in a pure and truthful way. There's no way Hollywood, I could make a film in Hollywood. This is the other answer to your question. It has been discussed now and again, but you know, my late producer who died used to go and have meetings with Hollywood people and say, they'd come back and they say, look, they don't care that you haven't got a script. They don't care that they don't know what the film's going to be about, but they will insist on having an American movie star in the film. So I said, let's walk away. You know, I don't want to do that. For what purpose? So, you know, it's not really relevant, actually.
Okay, and one of the things that your films were called was like a cliche called a kitchen sink drama. When did you get tired of that cliche?
Well, I mean, to be honest, it's not really. It's the expression kitchen sink drama dates back to an earlier period in my films.
Sure.
And it's never really seriously been applied to my films. I mean, by some people, some journalists might have done, but it's not accurate. I mean, the kitchen sink drama was very much theatre work that came out of the 1950s, and in fact carried on into those British movies, the so-called British New Wave, the films of Carol Rice and Tony Richardson and John Schlesinger and so on, in the early 1960s. And really, it's never really been a label that's seriously been used for my film, so I don't have a feeling about it.
They also call you a festival darling. Do you know that?
No, but it sounds very interesting.
It sounds very interesting, but I was always curious what the words Best Director Award for Naked or Palme d'Or for Secrets and Lies, how did it help you professionally? Did it make it easier or harder in any ways?
It's never made it harder.
Okay.
I mean, you have to take it with a pinch of salt, as we say in English. You have to not take it completely seriously. But I mean, for example, the fact that Secrets and Lies at the Palme d'Or at Cannes and was then nominated for 5 Oscars made it much easier for us to raise the money for our next film, which at that time was the biggest budget film, which was Topsy Turvy, which is a
Period drama.
And there's no question in anybody's mind that but for those awards and nominations, we wouldn't probably have been able to raise that. So you know, in the end, it does no harm. It's good for the public to know that these things are happening, and so it's. But you know, the important thing is that not to take it any more seriously than it deserves. You know.
And what happened to Peter Lorre? I mean, when it was rejected by Cannes Film Festival and somehow by New York Film Festival, what happened? Did you have any explanation to that?
No, there's no explanation. We were profoundly upset that it was rejected by Cannes. But you know, it's their prerogative to do what they want. I mean, Vera Drake was also rejected by Cannes.
And it won in Venice, the Golden Lion, right?
And I really don't. You really have no explanation for these things. And the same is true. And I don't want to dwell on it. About the New York Film Festival, which is very, very surprising and disappointing because that's a very good festival I've been to pretty well all of my films, where you have a very intelligent audience and very smart discussions and all the rest of it. And it would have seemed to me very natural for Peterloo to be in that festival. But you know, if you've seen Peterloo, if anyone's seen it, I hope it's not boring, and I hope it's stimulating and it's rich, and it gives you a great deal to feel and think about. But you know, there is a film which, by definition and without apology, contains long speeches and discussion and so on and so forth. And some people who have got a fixed idea about what movies should be, and maybe it's a kind of Hollywood concept, think, well, maybe there's too much talking or something, you know. But you have to take the rough with the smooth.
How personal is the story of Peterloo for you? I know that you treasure this film a lot, and this is the latest film that you made. And
I treasure all my films.
I know, of course, I'm sure. I'm sorry. Yeah, but I mean, how personal is this story for you? You're from Manchester, and
I am from Manchester, but the interesting thing about that is, I mean, if anyone doesn't know, the film is about an event that happened 200 years ago in Manchester. I grew up in Manchester, very close to where it happened. But growing up as a kid, we didn't really know about it. Nobody talked about it. For some reason, it's strange because it turns out to be well known enough, you know. And it was good to make the film from that point of view. But in the end, I wouldn't have needed to be a native of Manchester to make the film. You know, it's a film about a universal subject of democracy.
okay, and you in the late period you turned to period dramas. I mean, we have Mr. Turner, you have Peterloo, and I think I'm not a filmmaker at all, but I think this is a very different kind of beast than you make a contemporary.
Yes,
film.
I mean I think it so happens. I would say this: it so happens that the last two films have been period films. But the film before that was Another Year, which was definitely not a period film, and the one before that was Happy Go Lucky, which was not a period film. Vera Drake was a kind of period film. The one before that was All or Nothing, which wasn't. Topsy Turvy was the first period film, apart from Career Girls being 1.5 period films.
Right.
So I don't think you should. It is a different kind of beast, but then you know I try in any case with my films always never to make the same sort of film again within the genre.
What's different about making a period film? Because there are obvious things like you have the costumes, you have to be true to the historical moments, and how does it change your perception as a director of the story? How the process?
It doesn't. I mean, the job. I mean, the only practical differences between a period film and a contemporary film, which is obvious, is that you can't take the characters out and make them walk about in the streets in the real world, because the real world doesn't exist unless you build it. If we saw Cossacks last night, the Hollywood built a whole Ukrainian village. You know, well, you can't really do that with my sort of budgets. So those are practical things, but from a conceptual point of view, it's about putting people on the screen, characters, a world that is real and believable and solid and meaningful. Now, there are films kicking around always, period films, where they say, well, the language, we can't make them speak period language because it'll be inaccessible. The audience has to understand it. Let's make the dialogue, the language modern. And let's have the women not wearing corsets because it's not sexy, and let's lower the necklines, and let's do this and do that, and not bother about period detail and not make it look period. Now, for me, that's not what it's about at all. So what we do, and we've done it in Peterloo, and we did it with Mr. Turner, and we certainly did it with Topsy Turvy, is to say, let us go as far as we can on every level to be accurate as we understand it. So that it then becomes, it has a sort of integral, an integrity, and that the audience can believe in this as being a real world. And in Peterloo, even the language that they speak, particularly the vernacular of the working class northern characters, is very, very. Some of the words they use, if anyone speaks English and sees it, are very archaic words that are no longer in use, you know, and so on, because that's how they talk. So we researched that, and we enjoyed researching it. Enjoyed it's part of the whole thing, which applies in all these films of mine, to put as much as you can on so many different levels to make it real.
Well, a lot of critics said that, okay, like we take the Naked, the drama with David Thewlis, and so the main character, he's obsessed of the end of the times. He's obsessed of, you know, the millennium, And how optimistic are you about life?
Well, that's a very good question. In Peterloo, towards the end, on the evening before the great day of the demonstration and the massacre, you see the central woman and her husband in bed, and the granddaughter is there. And they're saying, and it's 1819, and she says, I wonder what life will be like for her in 1900. Now, we put that scene together, we created that scene. In fact, 1 week before my first grandson was about to be born. He was born, and he's nearly 2, and he's a healthy little kid. And so I, in the context of knowing that I was going to have a grandson for the first time, was thinking about what will the world be like for my impending grandson at the end of the 21st century, in 2100. So those were my thoughts. And that made me think about the question about 1900 from the point of view of the beginning of the 19th century. So here we are at the beginning of the 21st century, 2 decades into the 21st century. And you ask me about optimism. And I look at my grandson, who's learning to talk and all the rest of it, and it fills me with optimism. Because he's something really positive and optimistic about everything, because he's an innocent 2-year-old. I look at the world, I look at what is happening, I look at the rise of the far right everywhere, I look at the disaster that is going on in the United States, the huge disaster that's happening in the UK, which is completely irrational. And I think about climate change and all the things that we're all worried about, and it's very difficult to be optimistic on some levels, whilst at the same time, I mean, here we are, I doubt that there's one person in this room who doesn't share a general philosophical view of what we want the world to be, and we are therefore, by definition, all optimists. But it's hard. You have to. We are we not? In the beginning of the 3rd decade of the 21st century, we are struggling with our optimism versus our pessimism. So, that's the answer to your question.
But then the character in this particular scene that you mentioned, he says, that the husband, he says, like, nothing will change. So you share this thought.
He says some things will change and some things never alter.
Yeah, right. And, well, I think that talking about the events in the UK, you're talking about Brexit.
Yeah.
So how did it influence you, like a filmmaker, as a filmmaker?
Well, Brexit happened during the time we were making Peterloo. And I'm just reflecting on these matters now. So I can't answer that yet.
But in terms of, co-productions and all this stuff, did you make any,
Every film that I've made for a long time, every film that we've made, we have received a grant from the European Script Fund, which got us going. When and if and when, as is likely to be the case, the UK leaves the EU, and there are 1 million reasons why the UK should stay in the EU. It's ridiculous even to contemplate any reason why the UK should leave. But if and when it does, we won't get that money. That's the first thing. As to other ways it affects it, it will affect us, but I don't know what they all are yet. But it is a disaster, definitely.
Now they call it the golden age of television, and you started making films on television. So are you tempted to get back to make some kind of a mini series with total control?
Well, actually, in a way, that your question contains the contradiction.
Okay.
Because I don't actually, even if I wanted to, and there are reasons why I don't. I don't think you could make a mini-series with total control. I don't think that is a possibility, really. Apart from anything else, I am committed to independent, standalone films, cinema films. I think for people to sit together in a specialist environment like this, and to watch a film on a big screen, communally, etc., without popcorn, is important. Of course, I know, we filmmakers know that our movies will be watched on television, on digital platforms, on DVD, etc. When we were shooting the big scenes, the massacre scene in Peterloo, the joke was, we know everyone's going to watch this on that.
Yeah, on the phone.
iPhones,
On the phone, right?
But, you know, time marches on, and you have to accept these conventions. Of course, they're a way of stuff being disseminated. I listen to music in my apartment. We listen to music, and I have a lot of CDs. You know, I don't have any vinyl, and I don't have any wax cylinders, which died out about 1910, because you know we move on basically.
Yeah, what a surprise. But talking about the miniseries and the Total Control, I know that you like David Lynch. You said that he's alien to you, but he made this 18-episode Twin Peaks: The Return, and it's like insane. It's an insane.
I mean, one of the problems, which is a technical problem for me, in making sorry, I was distracted.
Yeah, we're talking about the miniseries, right?
When I make a film, as we've already talked about, we spend like 6 months developing the stuff, and then we shoot the film. Now, if you have a miniseries, the question is, when do you do that? Because they fall over each other, really. So in a way, but it's not really a problem for me. You know, I'm not too worried about it. You know, I'm happy to make single, one-off stories.
Well, and the silliest question I'm going to ask before we turn to the audience questions. During the opening of Odessa Film Festival, you said that you were afraid that you get the real Duke and you had to feed him and take care of him. What would you feed him? What do Dukes eat? Because you researched that, you made period films, so I'm curious, what do they eat?
Well,
actually?
having spent several days in Odessa, I realised that the diet here is to be given lots and lots of food on different kinds that you can't eat. There's too much of it. So we would simply have to give him a lot of food and hope that maybe with a bit of luck it would kill him, basically. Solve our problem.
Okay, guys, so now you just raise your hand and you get the microphone. Okay, here.
Microphone. And someone will translate.
Hello.
Oh, no, we have it here, if it's in Russian or Ukrainian.
If you sit down, the people behind you can see.
Дмитро Десятирик, газета «День». Власне, оскільки мої колеги... Оскільки мій колега вже поставив вам майже всі кінематографічні запитання, які я... Значить, оскільки мій колега вже поставив вам майже всі кінематографічні запитання, які я вам хотів поставити, тоді я вам поставлю гендерне запитання. Власне, в мене склалося враження, що ось, наприклад, чоловічі характери, герої-чоловіки у ваших фільмах, особливо в ранніх, найбільше в ранніх, трохи такі загальмовані, мовчазні, інертні, інколи агресивні і грубі. І вони інколи навіть не хочуть сексу. Тобто вони якимось чином перебувають у конфлікті з оточуючою реальністю. І з другого боку, жінки дуже часто виступають жертвою саме ось такого ставлення. Це була ваша інтенція, то чому так вийшло?
The gender question.
Yes. Well, it's a strange question. I don't really know what you're talking about, what film. I mean, I'm sure you can isolate certain elements in some, perhaps one or two of my films that relate to what you're saying.
For example, first movie,
Bleak Moments.
yes.
Bleak moments. Okay.
For example, this movie with the guy naked
Naked. Okay.
too.
Yes, I mean, it's such a general question. I don't really have an answer to it because each film has its own. You know, there are strong men and strong women. There's certainly a lot of strong women in my films. I can't really answer the question with respect. I don't really buy the premise of the question.
Okay. Do we have another one? Yes, please. Here.
Микрофон хтось заберіть у мене.
Hello, Anatoly Gvozdetsky, Equinus Journal, Alaskan English. We had a chance to take a look at Peterloo, which is absolutely brilliant. We love the way you reconstructed historical events, especially in particular those dialogues and those character portraits. But my question is, apart from recalling the tragic events in 1870, which are important for English history, was it a message to modern political elites that we still have the same problems with the democratic surfacing of the world that we used to have 200 years ago?
Absolutely, absolutely. It's the fundamental issues in Peterloo are entirely relevant to our contemporary world. It's about people's voice, about the power of authority, and all of those things, and democracy, of course, no question.
Yeah, and one of the things that you said in the interview about Peterloo, that 200 years ago, these people, they didn't have the right to vote and they didn't have education, and now we have an education and the right to vote, but we don't. And
yes, I mean, there is absolutely no question that the guys who are fighting for the vote, for democracy, 200 years ago, if they were to get into a time machine and come forward 200 years and see, certainly in the UK, many people do not vote. They don't exercise their right to vote. Not only from laziness, but from cynicism and from ignorance. And, I personally think it ought to be compulsory, like it is in Australia. They would be horrified. They would be astonished, and they would be disgusted, actually. Now, I'm sure that has a resonance here, but here you have a different history with democracy and so on. But nonetheless, it's relevant. I think it's relevant everywhere, and not least the way the world is going.
do you think we can fix that?
Well, it's not, with all due respect, it's not in this room. I am no more qualified to say that than anybody else in the room.
Okay. So the next question, please. Okay.
English or?
We'll see about that. This
Hello.
is the surprise. Hi.
I speak Ukrainian.
Oh, okay then.
I'll tell you what.
I need to.
Well, when I put this on, you can start speaking.
Okay, I'm waiting. I speak but English, but very well.
Ви можете поставити питання українською, будь
Добре.
ласка.
По-перше, дуже дякую за те, що ви приїхали до нас. Моє питання, у мене 3 питання. Що ви порадите починаючому режисеру? Які риси характеру притаманні режисерам? Як ви ставитесь до жінок-режисерок? Чи є гендерна нерівність в цій професії, на
Це вже
вашу
4.
думку? І яка задача сучасного режисера? Дуже дякую за відповіді.
Well,
There are like 5 questions.
yeah, 17 questions.
17. The whole list.
Well, obviously, we all look forward to a time which is gradually moving in the right direction, when there are as many women making films as men, if not more. I mean, there should be no reason why it shouldn't happen. And of course, historically, there have been a small number of women film directors, and simply it's obvious that that is something that should develop. What is my attitude to? What was the other question? What was my attitude to?
What do you think? What differs? What kind of qualities should a director have? That was the second question, if I'm not mistaken.
Що ви порадите починаючи?
Okay, what would you recommend to the starting upcoming director?
Well, the first thing I would say to any young director is the first rule is never compromise. Make the film you want to make. Speak truthfully. Don't start to do things for the wrong reasons. There was another question about
Які риси притаманні
what kind of qualities should a director have? This is the question that goes on.
You know, a director is a storyteller, and a director is got to be, as we talked about already, somebody that can organise and enable other people to do things. I can't really, with all due respect to your question, I can't say anything in front of this audience that will be a surprise, because it's obvious what the qualities of a film director are. So, with all due respect, I think it would be insulting the audience's intelligence to answer that question, frankly, because it's obvious what the qualities need to be. And you asked me what my attitude to women film directors is. Well, I'm very positive about them, and I welcome them, and if they make good films, great, and if they make lousy films, then I have no sympathy for them. Same as men film directors. I'm sorry, your questions are not very answerable.
Okay, so the next one. Okay, here is the first row. Okay.
Which language?
English.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Leigh. And you mentioned that you didn't ever feel the urge to go to Hollywood, to go upon to make movies in the U.S. At the same time, I think you mentioned that you didn't mind the success that your movies enjoyed overseas and some Academy Awards nominations that they have received. So the question is, did you ever feel any influence by any of American filmmakers in terms of your style, your ideas about how to make movies, or are your roots entirely British as a filmmaker?
No, not at all. I mean, if in an impossible world to imagine, my influences or criteria were only to do with British cinema, then I can't see how I would function as a filmmaker. As a filmmaker, and certainly in the early days as a young fledgling and student filmmaker, I was and remain absolutely open and knowledgeable about world cinema. So, you know, if the worst kind of question I asked is, who are your influences? And in a way, that's what you're asking me. Yeah. Well, I mean, the things that influence, the directors that feed into one's DNA, right, are many and various. I mean, on the one hand, I would say filmmakers like Ozu and early Kurosawa and Satyajit Ray, who made his films in India, and Jean Renoir, and to some degree the Nouvelle Vague filmmakers, you know, and so I've got a mental blank. Some of the Italian films, Rossellini and so on and so forth, that are very important. Similarly, the same is true of Keaton, Buster Keaton on one level, Billy Wilder on another level, you know, Fritz Lang on another level, you know, you know, the influence of the Swedish and the Russian and the German cinema are all there, you know, in one's DNA. So, and in and amongst all that are some influences from British cinema, but it's by no means, I mean, I don't think you could, if you really looked at my films analytically, you could begin in any shape or form to see them as being exclusively in a style that you would call British in terms of cinema culture. I mean, that's a slightly inadequate answer to your question.
No, no, it's
but
fine.
you know,
It's more than I.
yeah, and also you see, here's the other thing about Hollywood cinema, and I've said what I have about Hollywood cinema because the questions I'm being asked are about going to Hollywood and the relation to Hollywood now. I grew up, as we've already said, in Manchester, and I left town when I was 17 to go to London to be a student. Up to that point, up to 1960, when I went south to London, up to that time, I went to the pictures, the movies all the time. As often as they would let you or you could afford it, I went to the movies. And there were lots of little cinemas around that have long since disappeared, and it was cheap, and you could see 2 films in every programme. I never saw a film that wasn't in English. I only saw Hollywood movies and British movies. They didn't show films that weren't in English. So I grew up in the 1940s and 50s seeing Hollywood movies. So Hollywood films, you know, I mean, you know, I saw as a kid any number of John Ford westerns without necessarily reading directed by John Ford. You know, later I realised that's what I'd been looking at. You know, so the existence of Hollywood movies in my subconscious or my DNA is there. You know, whichever way you look at it. But that's these things that become organic and integral.
Thank you so much.
One of the things that I learned about you that you're pro-digital, and when things that like Christopher Nolan or Quentin Tarantino say that they want to save the film, I mean the 35mm or something, that you think it's bullshit.
I don't think it's bullshit. The truth is that, you know, for years, I and my cinematographer Dick Pope has shot all of my films since 1990. I mean, for years we were passionate about film. We will only shoot on film, and just as for many years, my films, if you look at them right at the end, they had a little logo which we had designed with scissors and sprocket holes saying "edited on film." We were very strict and religious about that. And he said, no, we have to preserve film. Film is, you know. But when it came to the crunch, for practical reasons, which is mostly financial reasons, we were encouraged to make Mr. Turner digitally, and indeed we shot Peterloo digitally, and we also made a short film which we shot digitally. And the truth is that a lot of people, a lot of very talented people, have quietly been working very hard over the last few decades in developing this medium, which is, without prejudice, incredible. You can do amazing things with it. So the thing is to embrace it and enjoy it and deploy it and make the most of it, and you know, which isn't. I don't think it's bullshit for Martin Scorsese and the other guys you mentioned to be so passionate about 35mm celluloid film. Great, but it's not the be all and end all. It's you know what's important is using the medium and how you use it, what you use it for, and what you achieve with it. So I'm kind of I think that's important to say. Really.
Okay, thank you. Let's move to another question. Oh, we have a lot of this lady in the first row.
Добрый день, мы благодарны вам. Мы очень благодарны вам за визит. И поговорим сейчас о самом неприличном, о чем можно. Это о деньгах. Все-таки не раскрыт вопрос с Голливудом до конца. Если у вас было такое количество номинаций, и вам предлагали снимать фильм в Голливуде, неужели как для художника не интересно использовать такого рода бюджеты для реализации своих идей? Вообще, могут ли деньги и погоня за бюджетом испортить замысел, вот на мой взгляд?
Let's talk about money.
I'll go back to what I said earlier. That, you know, see, for me, Hollywood's not an issue at all, really. It's about independent films that come out of our worlds. If what you're talking about were only a question of money, then fine, I will take more or less money from more or less anywhere, provided there are no strings attached, provided there's no interference. And indeed, the money for Peterloo came from Hollywood. It came from the Amazon studios. That's Amazon money. And we made the film absolutely as we would wish to, in the UK, with a completely UK cast and crew, according to our criteria, and I've already said they didn't interfere with it. So if your question is just about money, fine, there's no problem. If your question is about going to Hollywood because of the opportunity to make bigger budget movies, i.e. Hollywood films, set in America, then I have no interest in that at all. And if I have to say, if I was a filmmaker from Indonesia, say, or an African, or from an African country, you wouldn't be asking me that question. You wouldn't. So you have to regard me as a third world filmmaker from a small group of islands off the French coast. That's the answer to that.
Oh, that's great. Okay, another one. Raise your hand. The lady in here, like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 7th row here in a gray and blouse or something.
Hello, English. We don't need the earphones. I wanted to ask, how do you select topics for your films, and how you decide that the topic, which topic will be worth to go on the film?
Well, it's an interesting question because I don't think, on the whole, any one of my films really is about one thing. I think pretty well all of my films, in different ways, are about a whole lot of different things. And although some films that I've made, like Peterloo, Mr. Turner, Topsy Turvy, Vera Drake, if you like, with a very clear thing that this is a film about this event, this is a film about a backstreet abortionist before the Abortion Act in 1967, etc. Quite a lot of my films, I've embarked on them with very fluid ideas, because in the end, what they encapsulate and embody and what they're an expression of is a whole lot of different preoccupations about life. So in the end, the bottom line, the fundamental answer to your question is it's about life, which is why you don't see me making science fiction or future fantasies or such things, because it's about the real world, and in a way that's the subject matter really. Obviously I make decisions about we're going to deal with this or that, or have a different spirit, but they're all within the same territory and the same, if you like, the same genre or something. So it's hard to answer your question very specifically. But they come out of preoccupations and concerns, really.
Okay, another one. Yep, here the guy waving his hand. Yeah, there.
Дякую. Дякую за мікрофон, тому що ви весь час звертаєте.
We're trying to gender balance the questions. That's why we ladies first.
Which language are you speaking?
Ukrainian. It's gonna be Ukrainian.
This is in Ukrainian too, so
Okay.
maybe this is Russian. I don't know.
No.
I haven't quite got the hang of it yet.
No, you have to. No, not to worry.
I don't speak English. Excuse me. Юрій Швець, кінотеатр. Я хотів запитати, ви згадали про прихід правих, якби це не дуже кінематографічне питання, але на мій погляд, воно радикально кінематографічне. Ви згадали про прихід правих в Європі, ну і не тільки в Європі. І оскільки відомо, що якби нічого в світі не відбувається, все на все існує якби історична об'єктивна реальність. Тобто, можливо, ліві роблять, до яких належать всі кінематографісти, ну як мені здається, ну так, я думаю, ну більш-менш. Можливо, роблять якусь помилку, якусь беруть фальшиву ноту, ну ту, що була на початку, із динаміка, і з чим дають можливість приходу правих. Що це за нота, на ваш погляд? Зі сторони демократів, до яких належать кінематографісти, ну як мені здається.
I don't understand the question.
Let me. I'll try to adapt that. I think that what the member of the audience asks is that now that we have the far right rising in Europe and everywhere in the world, like the filmmakers who are left wing, that they do something wrong, and that's why the world turns to the far right. I don't know. Maybe this is the question.
Do you think that? Do you think that?
Що кінематографісти роблять помилку? Так.
Yes, he thinks that.
I don't think I think it. It may be that there are people on the right, on the far right, who react, who would say that they're reacting to the artists of the left, or what they would regard as the privileged elite, that there are artists on the left, but that isn't the cause. The causes are, it's not for me any more than anybody here to reflect on them, but the causes are economic and socio-political. So no, I don't buy that at all, really, not at any serious level, frankly.
So another crisis of a liberal idea.
Well, it may be, but I don't think it's. I think to start talking about that is the cause is very, very. I don't think it's accurate. I think it's very limited. I think if I understand what you're saying.
Okay, let's move to another question. Okay, then here is the lady in the blue sweater. I don't know where to see that.
Добрий день, українською.
Just a moment.
Добрий день. У мене питання стосовно українських фільмів. Чи бачили ви останнім часом, чи взагалі українські фільми? Якщо так, то які найбільше вас вразили, так, які вам сподобалися? Дякую.
I apologize, but I haven't seen any Ukrainian films recently.
Okay, another one. Yeah, here the third row.
I'll speak in English. Hi, welcome to Odessa, I wanted to say. And I've got plenty of questions, but I'll try not to be selfish. So one of them is casual, and another two professional ones. So as I myself lived in Britain, and in particular, kind of not in Manchester, but in Barnsley, so I'm a bit familiar with the northerner.
Yeah.
I'd like to ask, what's your first impression of Odessa or of Ukraine if you are first time here?
We can skip that question.
Okay.
And let's move to professional.
Right. Okay. So the professional questions, as you are theater and film director, so both mediums. How do you differentiate these two arts, and in particular working with people on a movie set and on the theater stage, if anything, how it's different, actually collaborative process with people, with actors?
It's, I won't answer your first question because frankly there's nothing to say about it. I like Odessa, it's the first time I've been here, full stop. The only differences between making a play, in my own way of working, and making a film are the differences inherent in the medium themselves. There's no difference in the way that I work creatively with the actors or indeed anybody else. But obviously there are different disciplines in a theatre play from a film. Obviously you make a film in bits, and although the actor has to know what the character's journey is, still you make it in bits and you sort it out afterwards. A play, when I construct a play, I have to take the responsibility of knowing that the actor has to find his or her route through the thing in one performance, and not only that, but it's got to be built in such a way as it can be done any number of times over and over again. So those don't fundamentally alter the concept or the integrity of the work, but those have to be taken into consideration as part of the discipline of the medium. But those are the differences are only those that are inherently different in the actual medium, but there's no difference in the way that I work creatively.
When are you the happiest while making the film? You know, different directors give different answers, like editing or preparation process, or maybe like they see it during the premiere. But what's your answer to that?
Well, some people are surprised when I say that the long period of working with the actors and doing the improvisation and the preparation, that's the only part of it that I really don't like very much. I don't dislike it, but it's not.
So this is masochistic for you.
Well, it's not. You're not producing. At the end of every day, there's nothing to show for it. All you're doing is preparing for something that's going to happen. It's great in many ways, and it can be very enjoyable, but it's not the thing. Shooting a film is fantastic. I mean, it's a great experience. Anyone that does it, it's great. For me, going into the editing, the cutting room, as I still insist on calling it, is a joy. First of all, that's where you make the film finally. All films are made in the editing, of course, we know. And also, it's like a rest cure. After the ordeal of getting up at 4 o'clock in the morning for a long stretch, it's more relaxed, it's more, and it's very enjoyable. And also, there are, you start the editing and then you go away and you work with the composer and you come back and all of those things. So, and the final processes, the mixing and all that, it's great. To be honest with you, I love filmmaking. I think it's a great and very stimulating medium, and that's all I have to say about it.
Okay, another question?
Thank you.
I think, okay, we have, there is a guy in the, 8th, yeah, you can wave your hand. And I think it's going to be in Ukrainian or in Russian, let me...
Добрый день.
Just a moment.
Владимир Стаценко. Спасибо большое за вчерашний фильм, который мы обсуждали. Вот. И когда я его смотрел, у меня было впечатление, что, в общем-то, все повторяется по истории, независимо от времени. Есть политики, которые о чем-то спорят, есть народ, который страдает. В конце концов, появляется военная машина, которая, в общем-то, умеет делать только одно – убивать. Но все войны рано или поздно заканчиваются, но остаются покалеченные души, остаются ветераны, которые страдают посттравматическим синдромом, который вы тоже вчера упоминали, остаются погибшие. Как вы считаете, как это было в 19 веке, мы видели, да? Ветеран, который, в общем-то, прошел Наполеоновскую войну, в конце концов остался без работы и погиб уже на территории своей страны. Как сейчас эта проблема должна решаться в 21 веке по поводу пострадавших военных конфликтов?
Oh, it's a very serious question, I think. Too serious.
Kind of vague.
Do you think you have to answer that?
I don't think, I don't think it's my prerogative or my the question, do I have to answer it? I don't know that I can answer it. We all know that we confront serious dangers at this point in history. I don't know how many wars or near wars or half wars or threatened wars have happened since 1945, since the end of the Second World War, but a lot. And we know it's not over. We know that all aspects of what the questioner have just referred to confront us, and in this gathering together of intelligent people, I'm no more qualified to answer that question than anybody else, but we are all in it together.
Okay, next one, please. Okay, the one here. You just wanted. Is it a good one? Okay, please. There's this guy in a blue T-shirt. He says he has a good question.
Why do you ask if it's a good one?
I don't know. I just
Maybe it's a bad one.
now we'll learn that.
It's going to be in English.
Oh, cool.
I'm Ilya Spiegel, executive producer from Finland. Mr. Leigh, the Peterloo movie is related to the British history. My question is, if you were given a good story, if you were suggested to make a historical movie from a totally different region in the world, which you are not that acquainted with as Great Britain. For example, if it was former Russian Empire, would you be interested or would you feel capable to do such a historical movie?
Probably the answer is no, but you have to see Peterloo not first as a historical film, but first as a film. I'm committed, like many filmmakers around the world, to make films that come out of the territory, culture that I know. Right. And I think that's a very legitimate thing to do. Sure. So Peterloo comes out of that in the first place, and is an historical film. Apart from the fact that I don't make any films where somebody says, here is a subject, make the film. That's not how it works for me, as I've already talked about, and that's important. My question would be, I mean, supposing the discussion was about making a film about something in Russian history, so my question would be, why should I make this film? Shouldn't somebody else be making it? Shouldn't it be a film made by a Russian filmmaker or Finnish filmmaker or whatever? So, with all due respect, it's not really an issue for me at all.
Okay, thank you for the question. The next one. Here's the lady next to the guy in the blue T-shirt.
Hello, it's a pleasure to see you. My question is the following. So you write and direct your films by yourself, but sometimes it's not the case in the film industry. Sometimes the screenwriter is screenwriter and director is another person. So basically there's two artists who needs to work together and needs to communicate and collaborate and compromise. So who should compromise and how should this collaboration go on?
Well, as I've already said, all filmmaking is about collaboration. People either collaborate positively or they collaborate in conflict negatively. So whether you're talking about the relationship between director and actor, director and cinematographer, director and designer, director and editor, or the relationship between the cinematographer and the actor, or the cinematographer and the designer, all of these, or the costume designer, and you either have a positive or a negative relationship. Now, it so happens that it suits me and my sort of films, like many filmmakers, to be writer and director. But even that's not straightforward, because as I've already talked about, I involve the actors at a certain level in the writing, in the development of it. And that's all about collaboration. So I don't think in any serious or real or proper relationship in the performing arts that conflict need be a natural element. I mean, you look at the way that orchestras operate with conductors, and so forth. It's about how people collaborate, not whether they collaborate. I mean, really, that's all there is to be said about it. And in the end, when it works, which is what we should be talking about, is it works because you are all, in the best sense, but not literally, you're all speaking with one voice. I mean, I've worked with the same, as I said, I've worked with the same cinematographer for a long time, since 1990. Now, this is a guy who, for many years before he started to shoot films with me, was a documentary maker. That isn't to say that he brings a documentary style to the films we make, but he certainly brings a sense of how to film the real world. But he's a stylist, just as I am. We don't make naturalistic films, we make heightened films that get to the essence of reality. He is not, by any measure, an obedient puppy who just does what I tell him to. We are both individual, original voices. We collaborate, sometimes we disagree, sometimes occasionally we get angry with each other, but in fact we collaborate and we negotiate and find what we agree to do, and we make it, and we have harmony, and we arrive at something. And what he does, he couldn't do unless I do what I do, and certainly what I do, what we achieve, what we have on the screen, couldn't possibly exist unless he does what he does. So it's collaboration. So that's all there is to be said about it.
Was it always the case for you that you never liked to work with obedient puppies? Because some actors say that, they say that the main thing for me, like for the actor, for the actress, to please the director. So this is like obedient puppy.
Yes, I mean, I was talking specifically about cinematographers, but yes, I mean, I don't. But an actor who says, well, I don't know anything and I can't do anything, just tell me what to do. I mean, that's not going to. Whether I like it or not, that's just not how it works. I mean, I've already said earlier on, I work with intelligent actors that want, bring something to it, and not actors who arrive with a complete set of decisions. I will sack them if they do that, But that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about collaboration, and that's what we're talking about,
Okay, the next one. Do we have from this side? Yeah, okay. There's this guy somewhere. Yeah, in the other. We're gonna switch sides.
Александром Колкиным буду говорить по-русски.
Just a moment.
Are you the man in the toilet?
Да.
You already met.
He started.
Да, мы познакомились чуть раньше.
So you met in the toilet. Okay. This is an interesting. This is more interesting than your question.
I have to say, I don't. Given my orientation, I don't usually pick men up in the toilet. But here, I was washing my hands, and this guy started to ask me questions. So finally, he's getting the chance to ask me what he was going to ask. I hope what he's going to ask is respectable.
Я хочу задать такой вопрос. Творческая профессия действительно очень сложная. На вашем пути было множество жизненных испытаний, я уверен. И как вы с ними боролись, и что двигало вас вперед?
Well, no, I think this is the question about like you alternate the real life and the professional work, and it's not that funny. I mean,
Sure.
This is the life of the artist.
It is. I mean, I think. I'll just wait for him to sit down so we can listen to the answer. You can choose to be an artist in a bubble, an artist in a insular world just of art and a precious world. You can choose to live in the real world. For me, it's about living in the real world. It's about balancing. I mean, we're all, anyone that's an artist of any kind is mad. You can take that as a premise. We are mad. Okay, we are profoundly mad. We are non-conformists. We are crazy. And I'm no exception. There's no doubt about that. But I affect to live in the real world, to move around to travel on the bus and to go in shops and, to have children and take responsibilities and all the rest of it. So your question, I suppose, is about the balance between sanity and insanity, between the work and the life. The thing about filmmaking, apart from anything else, is that it's a practical business. If you write poetry, you can just sit in your bed all day and never go out and just write poems if you want to. If you think that's what poetry is about, which most of us wouldn't think, but you could do that. But you can't make films by staying in your bed all day or going to a beautiful remote place like some artists. Filmmaking is a practical business. We've already talked about it. It's about time and money and organisation and being there for people and and all sorts of. So in a way, you have to deal with life in a practical way as part of the balance that makes the work happen. And also, I think it's important too. Every film that I've made, I've been very, very aggressively insistent that we stop for meals, stop and have lunch, we stop and take a food. There are movies where they say, well, we'll take a very short lunch because we've got too much to do. We should have a sport show, or we'll take the food on the go while we're still working. I won't do it. People have got to eat and relax and these sorts of things. Whether that's relevant to your question, I think it is actually.
Okay, thank you. So we have time for two last questions. This should be really great. We should surprise the director. Okay, the lady there. Okay, yeah.
First, hello, welcome to Odessa. And my question will be, how did you get an idea to become a filmmaker, and why did you especially choose this job? Thank you.
Well, as I've already said, as a kid, I went to the movies a lot and all the time. And somehow, I think that very early on, I had a sense that that's something I wanted to do. But here's the thing. It was a general instinct to want to make films, make theatre. Well, as a kid, I saw movies, I saw shows, live shows, what we call variety, which is people singing in dance routines and stuff, conjurers. We have circus, with animals and clowns and all the rest of it. What we call in England pantomimes, which are kind of plays with music that are performed at Christmas time. All of these things stimulated me early on, and wanted to be involved in performance and storytelling. I think it's just a natural thing, really. And cinema is the most magical thing of all. I have no more profound things to say to answer your question.
But on the practical side, did you know that you can, earn money, earn for the living doing that?
I came from a background when nobody did anything like that at all. I mean, it was the idea of it was my father. When I said I wanted to, the first thing I did when I left school was I went to the Royal Academy of Dramatic Art in London and trained as an actor. My father thought it was the most outrageous, worst thing that could possibly have happened. But he really thought it was a disaster. I mean, nobody did anything like that in my world. And one of the things that my father was so made him so negative about it was because his father was a commercial artist who, you remember photographs that would be coloured in. And you remember those things, and that's what they did for a living. And in the Great Depression in the late 1920s, Grandpa couldn't feed the family. So my father's idea that his son should be an artist of any kind was anathema. He really, really couldn't face it. But that never got in my way, because you knew perfectly well that people do it. People made films, and people did do theatre, and people did do all these things, and they got paid for it. And you didn't really think about will I starve. You thought, where can we do it, and how can we do it? And in fact, in the 1960s, for a long period, I put on plays, original plays that we created, and we did it for no money. We actually used to somehow put things on because we believed in it and we were passionate about it. And we did it on the breadline, with very little, if any, almost no resources at all, because the work was more important than anything else.
Why did you quit acting?
Well, I never really quit acting. I trained as an actor because I wanted to direct and write, and I wanted to know about it. And also it was a good starting point. So I didn't really quit acting. I mean, I think the only thing I would say about me as an actor is that the world is a better place without
Mike Leigh, the actor. And the last question, the short one, please. Yeah, okay. Here, yes, can you... Yeah, okay.
Which language?
English.
English, okay, cool.
Hello, hi. My name is Tonya. So we meet each other not in toilet, but at the dinner. So do you have doubt during your work about your talent or about your decision, or do you go right direction or no? And how do you deal with it?
I have a friend, an old guy I grew up with, who's not in the movies and who lives in the country. He's not well, and I talk to him a lot to see how he is. And when I'm doing a project, every time I call him and he says to me, "How's it going?" And I say, "It's terrible. I don't know what, it's really tough. I don't know what I'm doing." And he says, "It'll be fine. You always say that, but it'll be fine. Don't worry." And you do. You have, you're a filmmaker. You told me, you have. On some days you have doubts, and it's not a personal. It's not about me and my ego and it's about, am I doing the right thing? Am I dealing with it? Am I, should I be doing it in a different way? It's quite, you never know till it's there and happening that it's. Sometimes you after certain things happen, you think this is great, this is really good, we can get this and it's going to be fantastic. And sometimes you think, this isn't working, or it's okay, but it isn't up to the standard, And sometimes you just don't know what you're doing. You think, well, and sometimes you have to put on a reasonable performance of looking like you knowing what you're doing. And I don't believe there's a single filmmaker in the world who wouldn't tell you the same story. And on that note, thank you very much. Good
Ladies and gentlemen, the one and only Mike Leigh. Thank you very much. Thank you. It was a pleasure.